Recently I've gotten back into making some custom die-cast. I've got a renewed interest in adding to my collection of my absolute favorite race team of all time, and that is the Team Renzi number 25 that ran in the Busch Series from the early 2000s through about 2011. And they ran 6 years of that with the U.S. Marine Corps sponsorship. And the most beautiful paint scheme they did, and they did some great paint schemes, was this car. They called it the Freedom car. They ran it in 2002. And it was never done in 1/24th. Hot Wheels did do this 1/64th version. I've always wanted this in my collection in a 1/24th, so I've decided to make a custom. So this video I'm going to kind of go through the process of making a custom die cast and how I've kind of approached it. So this is the car that I want to do in custom. And when I'm doing a custom die cast, you know, when it's possible, I try to find a 1/24th donor car that is the right model, something close to the right year. And when it's got the right base color, that makes it a lot easier because I don't have to strip and paint the car. I hate the process of strip and paint off of these cars. It's messy and smelly and no fun, and I don't like to do things that are no fun. So when possible, I like to find a car that has the right base coat color. And as you can see, this, oh, what year is this? 2000, I don't know, it's early 2000s. Ricky Rudd Rent-A-Center car is indeed the right base color. It's got a beautiful blue base color, and as a bonus, you can see the rear spoiler is already yellow, as it is on this car. So this is going to be a great donor car. This is a Team Caliber Owners Series, highly detailed, and my objective is to make this 1/24th Ricky Rudd Rent-A-Center Team car look a little bit more like this 2002 Renzi Marine sponsored Freedom car. So we'll take you through the process, and hopefully this will come out fairly decent. So step one is to start disassembling the car. If you're all familiar with die cast, you know that a lot of the higher quality die cast have got 4 screws in the bottom here that hold the chassis to the body. So we'll remove those screws and separate the chassis from the body. These highly detailed Team Caliber Owner Series have such amazing detail that there's tethers for the hood and trunk lids, just like there are in the real cars. So we'll have to cut those before we can separate the body from the chassis here. Where's my snippers? Okay. So now we have the body separated from the chassis. We're not going to do a darn thing to the chassis, so we will just set this guy aside, and it'll sit until we're ready to put her back together. Boy, if you haven't taken a good look at these Owner Series, the detail on these is unbelievable. I mean, the rear shocks and springs actually actuate plug wires. And this is just an amazing little piece of die cast here. Okay, so the next step in disassembling is there's a couple little brackets here that hold the hood and the trunk lid in place. They're held in with Phillips screws. So we'll remove those, and the the little deck templates and dash and all that. This little firewall piece comes out, and then that leaves the dash part here basically loose, but it is attached up at the top of the windshield. So I've got to pry that out of there. It's glued in. Usually I can pry it out without damaging it too bad. Yep, and that came right out. All intact and looking good there. That will free the hood up to come right off. The last remnants of those tethers got out of there. Okay, so that frees up our hood. Set that aside. Now we've got the rear deck lid to contend with here. Little bracket that holds that in place. That frees up the trunk lid to come out. Again, hey, trunk lid done. Again, how perfect is that this has got a yellow trunk lid in my die-cast. My custom needs that same yellow trunk lid, so that saves me some painting. Plus it'll retain that detail of the little silver brackets on the back that I would absolutely not try to paint back on. So looking good so far. So now that pretty much just leaves the glass and this rear trunk lid, this rear trunk deck, whatever. So that generally, you don't want to try to pull that out until you've got the rear glass out. So let's take a look at how this glass is held in. Better quality die-cast. I think the action are pretty similar with these team calipers. The glass is basically held in by pins in kind of the corners. They set them in and then they put a little dab of glue on those pins to hold those windows in. So to get them out without breaking the glass or damaging it, we're just going to kind of pry the glue off of the edges of those pins that hold the glass in. So I'm going to try and do one here while I'm holding the camera just to give you an idea how that works. Forgive my camera work here. So now that I've got most of the glue kind of tapped off of there, this glass will start to come loose, this window, and then I can just kind of gently press it out of there. Again, I'm kind of struggling here to film this as I do it. I don't have a good setup to film. There it goes. And then that'll pop that right out of there. And then you're left with the window glass with the little pegs. And then when it comes time to put it back in, you're just going to kind of reverse the process and put a dab of glue on there. So I'm going to go ahead and finish pulling the rest of these windows out, and we'll come back and show you what we got at that point. So the rear is definitely the trickiest because from the underside you can only get to the top two kind of corner nubs there. So you gotta, it's a little tricky. You can't really get to the bottom, but the bottom have two little pins that go in those holes there. You can usually kind of pry those up. There's usually not a ton of glue on those. So that just leaves this rear deck lid, or whatever you call this thing. And it's held in by a couple of pins there, and you can see it looks like they'd maybe just melt that plastic that goes through there. So again, just prying that plastic that's holding it in there off with a little utility knife usually is all it takes to get that out. So that comes out, the little nubs there that hold it in place, and you're left now with a little bucket full of parts here, hopefully all in one piece, not broken. The key with pulling these windows out is just to be gentle. Go to work on that plastic that holds them in these corners. Go to work on that glue and just chip it away gently, and be careful not to damage the window. Generally speaking, very rarely do I do any damage to the window. I'm able to get them out okay. These tethers for the roof flaps I don't worry about. So now I'm down to the to just basically the body. So now the objective is to get these tampos off of here and leave the base color. The way most of these die-cast are made, and there's a few exceptions, some of the Hot Wheels and even some of the newer Action, and I'm not sure, I haven't tried to do anything with real recent die-cast, but back in the 2000s, it seems the way they made these die-cast is they would put whatever the base color was, they would paint that on there, and then I don't know, they baked it on or cured it somehow, and it's a very durable finish. And then the graphics, the tampos that go on top of that are just some kind of ink that gets screen printed on or rolled on or something. So acetone or fingernail polish remover basically will remove these tampos and leave the base color in pretty nice shape usually. So and I try, where I can, I try to be kind of strategic about it. There's graphics on here, like the headlights and the Ford logo and the Taurus logo, that I need as part of the custom diecast that I'm doing. So I'm going to try and save as much of that as I can. If you don't need to do the decals for some of this stuff as you're redoing the car, it just it saves you time, and the original tampos look much better than the decals that I make on my computer and print out. So let's give you a little snippet here of what it's like to take these tampos off with acetone if you've never done it, and then I'm going to get busy and finish it up. So what I've got here is just some good old acetone that you can buy at just about any hardware store. Fingernail polish remover will work, I believe. It's pretty much just acetone, but this stuff's a lot cheaper and maybe a little more concentrated, so it works just a little bit better. So I'm simply going to open this up. And then I just use good old Bounty paper towels here, and I'm going to get some acetone onto this paper towel. And then we'll show you how easy it is to remove these graphics. So again, I try to be strategic about it. I'm going to try to leave the tail lights and the Ford emblems and the things that would be a part of the paint scheme of the new car, the custom car that I'm doing. So let me just kind of show you how easy this stuff rubs off here. Hopefully you'll be able to see. So I'm going to get rid of everything from this front edge all the way back, and then I'm going to try to be real careful around this tail light and leave that in place. So you'll see as I rub here, it just starts taking that right off. You can see that starting to come off there. And then, as you build up a lot of ink on your paper towel, I just roll the paper towel a little bit to another clean spot and load it up with some fresh acetone, and then just kind of keep the process going until I get down to that base coat. But you can see it's just continuing to come off on the paper towel here. I'm going to kind of get the side body down to the base paint here and show you the result, and then I'll set about finishing up the car without the hassle of trying to keep the camera going. But as you can see, now I'm down to that base coat, and it leaves that base coat in pretty nice shape. So it's pretty easy to pull the tampos off and get it down to that base color. So I'm going to go ahead and keep going here, and I'll come back and show you the result once I've got these tampos off. Okay, well, I've got this about as good as I'm going to get it. If you look close after you do this, you'll notice, I don't know how well you'll be able to see, but you'll notice that there's a little dullness to that finish after you've taken the acetone to it, and there's some very light remnants of the previous tampos. But you have to look really close, and once you get it decaled and then clear coated, it just brings that sheen right back. You'll also notice if you get after this, that sometimes on the very corners of the die-cast, that acetone, if you're rubbing, can take a little bit of that base coat down to the metal just on some corners. But again, typically your decals are going to kind of cover that up, and it really does end up coming out pretty nice. So, I've removed everything here that was a part of the original paint scheme that I don't want or need for the new paint scheme. I've left the Goodyear and the headlights and the Ford logo and the Taurus and the tail lights and the yellow spoiler. So this is done stripping, and I'm ready to move to the next step on this. Before I do, just to show you what kind of complete lunatic and fanatic I am of this team, I've decided to while I'm doing this, to go ahead and do a blue chrome version of this car. You know, if you're into diecast, you know they oftentimes will do chrome and blue chrome versions, and I've done a chrome diecast custom before, and usually the tampos will go right down to the chrome and then a little bit of polishing, decals and clear coat, and it just looks fantastic. So I decided to try this blue chrome, so I picked up a Mark Martin Pfizer blue chrome and I stripped it down, and it worked. It really went pretty well. I guess what I discovered is that when they do these blue chrome or red chrome or whatever, they start with a chrome car, which is a really durable finish, and then they put some kind of very light film or coating, I'm thinking it's a film, over top of it. And the acetone did, on the corners and a few spots here, did take some of that blue tint off. And I was kind of discouraged at the beginning, but I've decided, you know, the hell with it. I'm going to go ahead and continue with this idea, and maybe once it's decaled up, a lot of this will be covered, and then see how it comes out. So you guys can come along for the ride. This blue chrome may be a wash, I don't know. We'll see. There was a lot of white tampo on this Pfizer car that is going to be a little challenging. I'm not sure what I'm going to do there, but I'm gonna, you know, as I'm doing this, I'm gonna try and do the color chrome version right along with it, and I think it could come out pretty neat. So the next step we've got is to do any painting that needs to be done that is a part of the paint scheme that we're doing. You know, a lot of times the bottoms here are black or something. So on the Freedom car, there is a yellow stripe. The very bottom edge of the car is yellow all the way around to go with that yellow spoiler. So what we're going to do now is mask that stripe around the bottom edge of the car, and then get ready to prime and then paint that yellow stripe on. And then I believe beyond that, a bulk of the paint scheme are going to be decals, so we'll move on to the making and printing of the decal phase here. But anyway, this is where we're at. We're ready to move to the next step. So I'm going to get my stuff together and get ready to do some masking here, and then we'll take you along on the prime and paint. Okay, so I found that for the paint edge, this modeling masking tape made by Tamiya, whatever, it's kind of expensive, but I have found that it makes a much finer line. So I'll mask off the bottom of the car where the line is going to be between the yellow and the blue using this Tamiya tape, and then I'll cover the rest of the car with just good old blue painter's tape where I'm not going to have a line between the paint job. So I'll finish masking this off in the chrome car, and then we'll come back and prime it. Okay, I've got my cars masked up with the spots where I want the yellow stripe exposed. I use these turntables here to when I'm doing painting, and I tend to go a little overboard with the masking tape. Paint is pretty wily, and it'll find the smallest crooks. You know, and you hate to get this far into a project and then muck it up with paint. So, you know, I go a little nuts with the masking tape, but better safe than sorry, I always say. The primer that I'm going to use here is Model Masters. I've found I have pretty good luck with Model Masters, this lacquer system. So just some gray primer, and I'm going to hit that with some primer, and then let it dry a couple hours, and then hit it with the yellow. Give her a shot of yellow. We'll let that dry for maybe 15-20 minutes and give her a second quick shot, and then we should be ready to unmask and see how we did. Okay, so our yellow stripe is on and finishing drying up. Seems to have been successful on both cars. So that puts us where we need to be to start. The next step is going to be decals for these two cars. So I think that's going to wrap it up for tonight. I'm going to go upstairs and crack a beer and watch the rest of this race. And then tomorrow morning we'll pick up and see if we can start putting together some decals for these cars. Time to get started on some decals. So looking at the custom car that we want to do, you know, typically what I'll do is just search the internet to find the graphics that I need, and usually I can find them. Sometimes I'll have to take a picture of the car or something and snip it out, but usually I can find something pretty close online. So as we look at this car, one of the first things I notice I need is this eagle's head. So searching the internet, I was able to find a pretty close version of that, and using Photoshop here I was able to clip it out. So basically I'm just going to find these images and then I'm going to size them to the car. You know, I'll do some measurements here and try to size them to the car and take a first shot and get them all onto a Photoshop document, and then I'll do a test print just on regular paper and cut them out and see how close I got. So rather than bore you with all this, I'm going to cut out and start getting these decals together, and I'll come back when I'm ready to print my my test page. I think I've got all the graphics I need for the car developed here in Photoshop, and I've got my first best guess at sizing them appropriately. So what we'll do now is go ahead and print this to just a standard piece of paper, and then we can cut them out and try the sizes, and then I'm sure there'll be some adjustments to make once we've got them printed. So anyway, we'll do that, and we'll come back and see how they look. Okay, so we've committed these graphics to paper, and then now what we're going to do is cut them out and just kind of tape them on the car and see how we did. So I'm going to kind of cut away and get a couple of these snipped out and show you how I kind of size them up. After some quick sizing checks, I've got some stuff pretty close. These numbers are pretty good. The Statue of Liberty I think could be a little taller. The Marines is a little big. Going to come down a little bit and maybe a little narrower to allow room for that Marine Corps logo, because I don't have room for the Iwo Jima Memorial. So I'm going to resize a few of these and then try it again. The hood looks pretty decent. I think I'm going to bring the eagle down just a little bit, and I think that logo looks pretty decent here. But the eagle I'm going to size down. It probably would work as it is, but I am going to size it down just a hair to give myself a little more wiggle room. Trunk looks good, and the Capitol building, wherever that is, I think is going to work okay on the back of the car. My contingencies are a little bit big, so yeah. So we'll resize these and print them one more time, and that should get it there, and then we'll prepare to print the actual decals on the decal paper. Okay, I think I've got my decals ready, and I've duplicated on one sheet enough to do both cars, I hope. If I don't mess one up, just about fit them all on an 8.5 by 11 sheet. So it's time to print these decals. So to print these decals, I have an old Alps MD1000 printer. If you're familiar with these, you know what they are. It's an older printer. I don't think they make it anymore. The ink comes in these cartridges. What is unique about this printer is that it will in fact print white. So for doing decals on colored cars, obviously you need white. It doesn't produce the sharpest images on the planet, but it works pretty decent, and at arm's length the decals look pretty good, you know, if your graphics are decent. So the paper I use this Belk decal that I buy from decalpaper.com. It's a clear decal paper with like a blue background, so you can see your white when it prints. So anyway, I'm going to put this in the printer, and you've got to print this in two phases. You've got to lay down your white first, so you take your decals and basically you turn everything that you want either white or to have a white background into black. And then we're going to swap out our black cartridge here with the white cartridge. And then once that's ready, we're going to come back here and we're going to print. Now this it's an older printer, like I said. They don't make it, I don't even think they make the cartridges anymore, so you're just kind of stuck with the limited inventory that's left. But anyway, the newest driver that seems to work for these is for Windows XP. So I've got this old laptop that still runs Windows XP. But I tell you, if this printer or this laptop craps out, I'm done doing decals. I mean, you can find these, but if you do, they're stupid expensive, and trying to maintain an old Windows XP computer is tough. So trying to get through these last few marine cars before any of this stuff craps out, and hopefully it'll work out. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and print the white first, and the driver will allow you to define that you want just to lay down white as an undercoat, and then we can lock the paper into the printer so that it doesn't actually feed it out. It holds it in, and that gives you a better shot that everything's perfectly aligned when you put the color over top the white. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and say okay, and I always kind of hold my breath here because this thing's a little finicky. We get our dialogue, and if the time starts, we've got a successful feed, and we do. So it's running. It's going to take a few minutes for this to print, so I'll come back after I lay down white. I actually do 2 layers of white to try to get a nice clear white so that none of the color shows through. So once I got the 2 layers of white done, I'll come back and show you what it looks like in the printer, and then we'll print the color. Okay, so our white has been laid down. You can kind of see it there still in the printer, but I've put a double layer of white down, and that's going to give us our white base for all of the decals. And then we have a color version of the decals that we use, and I've basically eliminated everything that I want to be white specifically, and now we're going to lay the color down on top of the white. Okay, our decals have printed. It looks like they came out okay. I don't think I screwed any of them up. Hopefully, we'll know when we start putting them on the car. But as you can see, you know, it's not the sharpest images. They're a little grainy, and especially when you get into color and fade and things like. But you know, when you get them on the car and you get it clear coated, they look pretty decent. So. Yeah, whoops, got something there. That might be a problem. Well, we'll play that by ear. Anyway, so now is the exciting part. We're actually going to be able to start cutting these decals out and applying them and seeing these cars start to take shape. So this is definitely the fun part, seeing it come together. So we'll start cutting these out, and we'll come back and show you applying a few of these decals, and then we should be getting close to a finished product. Okay, so far so good. I'm actually really thrilled with how these decals are coming out. As you can see, the decal part, the clear part, really does lay down nice, and it's really flexible. They're not brittle like a lot of manufactured decals. They really are a pleasure to work with, and they're plenty durable to kind of wipe them down and get the air bubbles out from under them. So far I've got the contingency stickers on here, and I've got the Statue of Liberty on this side there. I've got the Capitol building on the back, and I've got the Declaration of Independence on the trunk lid. So far really so good. You know, because it's clear, you don't have to cut too close. You know, you don't have to trace the outline of the decal, just you know, nice and close. And it does leave a slightly shiny, you can kind of see there, a slightly shiny edge around where that clear decal is, but when you clear coat it, that just vanishes. So really these are great to work with. So I'm going to keep pecking away here and get this thing done. I'm getting really excited to see this car. Okay, the decals are all on, and I'm just thrilled. I'm really pleased with how this car came out. You know, it looks good now, but boy, after we give her a good clear coat, it's just gonna glean. Get it put back together. I've wanted this car since 2002 when they erased it. I was thrilled to find the Hot Wheels version of it. They're not exactly all over the place. Always wanted it good in 1 1/24th though, and here I am. I'm going to have it Team Caliber Owner Series in 1/24th. Excellent. I am really pleased.
So we let these decals dry for about 24 hours. I got burnt once clear coating too soon. The clear coat kind of shrunk the decals and wrinkled them a little bit. So we're going to let her sit for 24 hours and give her a good clear coat. We'll come back and show you what that looks like. Okay, the standard paint scheme has been clear coated, and just as I expected, looks great. Just super. Kind of gives these decals a nice protective layer, and it brings the shine and sheen back to the blue and evens it out there with the decals. So really pleased with where we're at here. So the clear coat is dry, so now it's time to start reassembling the car. Got all my pieces parts here, the glass and the internals, so we're going to go ahead and get started on that. So yeah, I don't know how much of this I'm going to be able to show, because it's kind of a two-handed operation here, but we'll show you maybe replacing a couple of the windows and see what we can do. Okay, so we'll try it from this angle from my phone, and we'll see how this comes out. So I was kind of start the windows back in from the outside, and just try to get those corners pressed back into place. And then just a little bit of pressure, and the window will typically snap back in with whatever glue is left on those little posts. Before the rear window can go in, you put the rear deck cover, rear dash deck, I don't know what it is, but we're going to get that guy pushed back in place. He's got to be in place before the rear glass can go in. And it just slides in place, and these little nubs go back into the holes that they came out of. Just like that. That's back in place. And then the rear window can go in over top of it. It's definitely tricky trying to show on the camera, but you'll get the idea. So once I've got the glass pressed, and snapped best I can back into place from the outside, it's still going to be a little bit loose because of all the glue that I kind of busted off of it to get the glass out. So at this point I will flip the car over, and we'll get a look at it from the inside. We're kind of right back where we started with the little nubs and a little residual glue to hold the windows back in. So all I'm going to do at this point is put a small dollop of glue on each one of these contact points here, these little pins in the corners. And I just use modeler's glue. It doesn't adhere necessarily to the metal, but as it dries it hardens real good, so I just kind of overlap the glue a little bit to the metal, and then that hardens and holds the windows in pretty well, at least in my experience. So we'll take a shot here at kind of showing you what that looks like, but I don't want to mess my job up here trying to get a little bit of footage. So let's see what we can do. So I'm just going to put a dollop of glue on that pin and then drag it across a bit to the metal. And then as that glue hardens, it should do a pretty decent job of holding that window in. And then I'm just going to make my way around all the pins doing the same thing. So I'll go ahead and get that done. Okay, so once I've gone around and put a little bit of glue on each one of those nubs in each corner of those windows there, I'll usually flip it back over and then just go around and press each corner down and make sure that every window is well seated in there while that glue is still a little bit tacky. And then just make sure that I've got everything tapped down and the windows appear to be in there square and flush. And then at that point I'm going to let it set for a bit and let that glue set up before I move on to the next steps, because you don't want to knock your glue out and back up a step or two. And so I'm going to let this sit for a bit, do something else for a little bit, and then we'll come back and move on to the next step. Okay, once the windows have had a chance to dry and are securely in place, the next thing I'll do is just take some lens cleaner, eyeglass lens cleaner, and a nice soft lens cleaner cloth, and I'll give a little shot of the lens cleaner to the cloth, and I'll wipe very gently the inside of these windows. Pretty good chance I got a fingerprint or two on them as I was disassembling and reassembling. So while I've got it apart, I'll wipe those down a little bit so I don't have any glaring fingerprints showing through the glass. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So yeah, just a shot of this lens cleaning solution on this lens cleaning cloth, and then very gently flip the car over and give the inside of these windows just a little wipe down. Nothing's more annoying than getting the car back together and then having the windows all fingerprinted up and looking terrible. Okay, our glass is back in and wiped down, at least on the inside, so now we're down to these last few pieces to get secured back in place. So we'll start with the trunk lid here. We're just going to set the trunk lid back in place and then get the car turned over. Alright, and with the trunk lid in place, we're just going to set our bracket back in place. Get it lined up. And then once the holes are lined up, we just simply are going to replace the screws. Next step is to replace the dash here, and typically what I'll do is put a little dollop of glue on that tip there that's going to secure back to the car. There we go. And then we're just going to set that dash back in place. Make sure that post lines up where it's supposed to. And then you can see the dash goes over these little pins here. And then we're going to put this firewall bracket back in place. And then once again we're ready to put our screws back in and tighten it down. Okay, one last piece here to put in, and that's that front lower grille. We'll just go back in place and bend those brackets to hold her back in. Okay, with your trunk and hood securely and properly back in place, making sure that's lined up good. Now we can set her back on the chassis and put the screws back in, and this assembly will be complete. And this is absolutely the most rewarding part. So we'll gently drop this chassis back in to the body. Should line right up. Making sure everything looks good. Again, we're being gentle. These decals are clear coated, but they're still a little on the fragile side. Normal handling is fine, but when you're doing this final assembly, it can definitely give you an opportunity to mess up what you've done if you put too much pressure on these decals. So I'll usually just get those screws started nice and gentle. Alright, and the finished product. As you can see, we've got our 1/64 we started with here, and I think we've successfully turned that Ricky Rudd Rent-A-Center into a 1/24 scale replica of the 2002 Freedom car. Man, thrilling. Like I said, I've wanted this car in my collection for a long time. So very pleased with how this came out. It's reassembled and ready to go into my display case with the other Marines cars. So we'll wrap this up with a final look at how that blue chrome came out. So here's the blue chrome version of the Freedom car. All in all, I'd say I'm pretty pleased with it. Most of the blemishes, were hidden pretty well by the clear coat and a little touch up with blue paint. So yeah, I don't know that it's as good as the standard paint scheme, but it's certainly at a distance looks pretty decent. So now we've got our blue chrome version of the Freedom car completed, as is this project. I hope you've enjoyed watching me transform these cars into the Team Renzi 2002 Marines Freedom car. I've sure enjoyed putting them together. Thanks for watching.